It is time to make a start. Before I do start going through the agenda formally, can I advise members that item 9 is withdrawn? It shouldn't have appeared in the bundle, so I don't know why there's been miscommunication somewhere, but it's gone. It's withdrawn. So, can I first of all I don't know why I have to introduce myself every time, but I'm Philip Owen, chairman of the committee, and would like to welcome you to this meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee, which I trust is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. I'm getting a thumbs up, so it is being recorded live. You're on whatever. Okay, first item on the agenda then, minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of November. Can I have your approval to sign them as a correct record? Thank you very much. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Now, I've got several here. Councillor Butler sends his apologies. He's on other county council business, and Councillor Barnfather is substituting. Councillor Upton thinks that Rushcliffe Borough Council is far more important than coming here, and I'm sure he's right. And Councillor Elliott is substituting. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Henry has given other reasons, and Councillor Pauline Allen is substituting, and I hope the dentist didn't hurt you too much the other day. We met in the dentist, by the way. Nothing untoward. Yes, well, I don't want to know that. And then I've got possibly Councillor Helen Ann Smith, and as I don't see Councillor Helen Ann Smith, and you've no substitute. No. Okay, so if you're happy to accept those, then we can move on. The next item, declarations of... Oh, and I should have just pointed out that Councillor Creamer so enjoys coming to this meeting that even though he's not the official substitute, he's decided to sit in. And you're welcome as ever, but you can't contribute, I'm afraid. I know you wouldn't. Any disclosable pecuniary interests, well, whatever interests they are now, disclosable pecuniary interests by the members or officers? Nope. Thank you. The first substantive item on the agenda then are the Ombudsman's reports, and these start at page 70. 70 of 7 of 70. And we have a recommendation to note, which we will at the end of the discussion. The first one, if we can go to the substantive pages of the Ombudsman's report, page 1 of the Ombudsman's report, page 17 of the pack. Mrs. X complaining about the council's actions when her child D, who is disabled, moved from children to adults. Now, I don't know whether children's are going to take this on or tell us any more, or whether adults, or whether it's going to be a joint effort. Who's going to kick off? You will.
So if I just introduce this, Councillor Owen, so it will be a joint effort, although it does say it's an adult's case. It is one that actually spans both departments. So this case is in 2 parts. The first part is regarding Mrs. X's direct payment, and colleagues from Children's will cover that element off, and then adults will pick up the transition part. So I'll just hand over to Children's colleagues.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. So I was responsible for the redundancy decision on the direct payment of the personal assistant. Due to the complexity of redundancy, I sought legal advice from our legal services, and it was agreed that redundancy didn't stand in this case, which was communicated with the payroll company. The payroll company have since disputed the redundancy, and we have, as per the Ombudsman report, now requested that redundancy payment to be paid.
Okay. That's it, is it?
In terms of the transition arrangements, so although the Ombudsman found fault that we had delayed the case, actually at no point did we take a decision to delay or postpone the assessment. The adult transition team received the referral in September 21 and carried out a visit in December 21. 1D was 17 and a half years, which would be usual practice for someone with that level of need. Once the assessment commenced and the initial support plan started, the key consideration was around short breaks and a carer's assessment. The support planning did take longer than usual, but that was due to Dee having an additional year at school. So we needed to wait out that additional year at school to see what he wanted to do following that. And also Mrs. X wanted to access short breaks with a particular provider who at that time were not taking any new referrals due to COVID and had a waiting list. Mrs. X was aware of that and indicated that she would be happy to wait for the preferred provider as opposed to us exploring other avenues. So following an already lengthy wait for that preferred provider, we did explore other options, and ultimately Mrs. X did subsequently agree for an alternative provider to take up the short break allocation. We were criticised for there being a delay when the original social worker was absent from work due to sickness. Well, the sickness occurred on the 9th of November and we reallocated another social worker on the 13th of December, which we wouldn't consider to be a significant gap within that or having a significant impact on the support planning. We did, make those representations to the Ombudsman, but unfortunately didn't change the outcome that the Ombudsman reached. So, we have made our representations, but it didn't actually change the outcome.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I think, and the committee has said repeatedly, we expect you to challenge where we feel that there is injustice to the council. And I hear what you say, and to me, those are not unreasonable explanations, and I accept the issue over redundancy. There was some dispute, but if we look at the bottom of page 7, paragraph 47, we see that at the time of my decision, the direct payments information published on the council's children's social care web pages is out of date. Now, that's a simple error. The other points I accept. It's it's a matter for discussion, but it's just a simple mistake, and I think committee would like to know what has been put in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. And at paragraph 51, however, and this is referring to the council, it did not properly record its consideration about this and why it decided to postpone. Now, the reasons might have been quite appropriate, but if you don't record them, and this is going back to complaints we've had before, we are not recording what we're doing and the reasons why we are doing it. And the next paragraph, paragraph 52, the council did not contact Mrs. X to explain its decision. Again, this is alluding back to problems that we've had before, and we were assured that this would not be happening again. So perhaps someone can address those issues before I bring in other members.
So just on the second point, we at no point did we take a decision to postpone the assessment. So there was nothing to record because we didn't actually make a decision to postpone. As I've already explained, there was no postponement. The age at which we picked the case up and undertook the assessment, we would consider to be appropriate. Hence, there not being a decision to record because we didn't take a decision to postpone. Equally, there was no decision to relay to Mrs. X about postponement, and I think this is one of the elements where, despite numerous, trying to explain this to the Ombudsman several times in several different ways, this point was particularly misunderstood. The Ombudsman considered that we had made a decision to postpone, which we hadn't at any stage.
Did we formally challenge this particular aspect of the Ombudsman's comments because they send us a draft report, don't they?
Yes.
And did we challenge at that
yes,
point?
Yes, we did.
And what was the Ombudsman's response?
They didn't accept the explanation, and that's not unusual. I mean, we've had this issue several times in the past, Councillor Owen, as you know.
Yes.
We get the draft report. We send back our comments and our challenges. They choose to accept that, or they don't. And that's as much opportunity to challenge as we have.
And what?
Do you want to say?
We have been in the process of updating the pathway and protocol. It wasn't so much out of date, but it did need reviewing. So it was originally done in 2016, so it clearly does need updating and reviewing, and that will be completed by the Ombudsman's deadline of the end of February now.
But surely there should be something in place to update the web page every time there's a change. I can't see why it should take 6-7 years to update a web page.
And that's something that we're looking at in this current review of that web page, is how we get that updated on a regular basis.
Right, Councillor Saddington, then I come to Councillor Payne.
Thank you for that. I mean, it appears to me to be a reoccurrence of lack of communication. Was there any reason why, when you knew there was a delay, yes, you've explained it wasn't, you weren't doing it on purpose, but would it have been too much for you to have written to Mrs. X and just said you have a delay, but you will be coming back to her? Because surely that would then prevent people going to make a complaint. In the same way as if I get emails and I'm waiting for an answer, I always write back to the resident to say I am dealing with it and I'll come back to you shortly. I think we often, in this committee, Chairman, have a problem of communication, and it's certainly, to me, a lack of communication. It only takes a second to write to somebody and say, I'm dealing with it, don't worry, I'll come back to you, and it does just placate things for a little while.
Thank you, Councillor Saddington. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that this is obviously a complex case that falls between two services, and I think the committee needs to recognise that, and I certainly recognise that, and I appreciate the candid honesty that the staff, particularly staff who have individually been involved in this case, have given to the committee, because I would imagine dealing with these cases is not the easiest situation. You know, you're dealing with very vulnerable people, and so I think we need to recognise and understand that. That having been said, I think there are two things that strike me from what's been said. It may well be legitimate and true, and I have no reason to disbelieve what's been said about challenging the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman not necessarily recognising that the council might be right. I think given that, Chairman, and it's not a decision we can make, but there are colleagues here in the room who might be able to pick this up elsewhere, this is something that ought to be looked at by overview and scrutiny, the fall between children's and adult services and the processes that exist. Because if we know the Ombudsman is taking decisions like this and coming down hard and heavy, perhaps in our view we might think that it's too heavy or that they're not in the right place on this. We ought to be doing what we can to improve processes. And the second thing I'd just say is, I agree with Councillor Owen, notwithstanding the explanations that we've had from staff, there are clearly issues here in this report that come out that were within the council's control. Waiting for several times for the individual to raise concerns before we got back to them, staff sickness explaining some of that delay, but actually some of that delay not being explained away by staff sickness, was completely within control of the council. Having our processes and procedures updated on the website was completely within control of the council. So I just think this issue around transition between children's services and adult services, recognising the complexity of this case, needs a bit of a closer look, and we're not in a position to do that, but clearly overview and scrutiny with a look with our colleagues here who've given the expert view that people are dealing with this day in, day out, to try and smooth out some of these processes might in future help us being maybe unfairly criticised by the Ombudsman if we do think some of this criticism is unfair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Payne. Although he's playing about on his phone at the moment, the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny will no doubt have noted your comments and will take appropriate action. I'm also going to suggest that we ask Marge to fix up another meeting between myself and the Vice Chairman with the Ombudsman to thrash out this sort of thing, because if the Ombudsman can't understand, and I mean, I hear what you say, Councillor Payne, but I think that 6 of one and half a dozen of the other here, we need the Ombudsman needs to be aware that we are not going to be a pushover as a council for complaints. We will accept and put our hands up, and I've always said this, where we are wrong and try to put it right, but where we think we are not wrong, we're not going to roll over. We're going to stand up. And if you're content with that, I will ask Marge to fix up a meeting again with the Ombudsman. Are there any other points on this particular case? Well, in that case, can we move on to the second one, which the complainant is complaining about the care and treatment provided to her mother, Mrs. C, by Sutton Court Care Home, acting on behalf of the County Council, and Skegby Family Medical Centre, the practice. Now, what do you want to tell us about that? Anything further you want to add?
Thank you. If I come in just to say, I mean, this is a very sad incident where the individual has had a really, I think, a poor experience. The challenge for us is, as the council, we've implemented all our actions, but we do think it's probably a harsh decision by the Ombudsman, in that although there are issues, they were raised particularly with the care home and with the GP practice. So I can understand, as I say, why the person raised that complaint, and they were concerned about it, and there were actions that were needed to address it. From our point of view at the council, we have addressed and implemented all the actions that were allocated to us. Unfortunately, it's difficult to do more than that in this case, and there is a question. We did push back again to the Ombudsman to suggest that the concerns should have been raised with the home as well, rather than necessarily with the council.
Well, it's more than a sad case, because the lady's dead.
I know.
You know, it's not a case of updating a web page. The lady's dead. Now, I was appalled when I read this case. Absolutely appalled. Not from a council perspective, because I don't think that we can be held responsible, or we should be held responsible, for what is going on in care homes on a day-to-day basis. But the Ombudsman says that that is the law, and we're the easy ones to kick. But it's the care home that is at fault. There's no doubt about that. And you'll see in the report, I've asked officers to liaise at a national level to see if that law can be looked at, because it's the Care Quality Commission who should be sussing out the poor practice that's going on in homes. But what appalls me even more is the GP practice that failed to attend to this poor lady who subsequently died. And to add insult to injury, they can't even won't respond to the failings that have been highlighted by the NHS. Now, that is outside of our control. I don't know whether it's something, again, that Overview and Scrutiny can have a look at, but certainly this sort of behaviour smacks of the post office, doesn't it? Doesn't it smack of the post office? That sort of behaviour, which is totally unacceptable. So I don't know whether members, you've got anything further you want to add to this. Councillor Payne and then Councillor Barnfather.
I mean, I entirely agree with you. I mean, I think this is absolutely shocking, horrific reading. And for the family involved and the loved ones involved, this must have been an absolutely awful situation to deal with. I mean, I think one thing comes out of this, and I also feel sorry for our staff who have had to deal with this individual case. It demonstrates that the council isn't able to outsource accountability. We've got a private care system here that allows a situation where the council is completely powerless to compel these people to actually take action or to answer the findings that the Ombudsman has found. But ultimately, we are ultimately responsible in terms of the Ombudsman's eyes. And I'm really worried about that. One of the things I think we should do, Chairman, and whether this is something you can pick up either as an additional recommendation or with a conversation over and above the action you've already suggested, which I think is right nationally, I think the Adult Social Care Committee needs to look at this issue about what further can we do as a council to regulate and monitor the situation. Clearly, I know we're already taking some robust action, but what further can we do? Because this will not be an isolated incident. Clearly, in this situation, there were loved ones who were willing to go to the Ombudsman and flag this issue. There will be other situations where there aren't loved ones or family members who want to go through the trauma of raising a complaint like this. So I'm not saying that to pass the buck or push the responsibility to the Adult Social Care Committee, but I think we just need to look again, is there anything further we can do to tighten our regulation and monitoring of this situation, to do what we can from our side. But I also wholeheartedly support your suggested course of action, Chair, because I think it's absolutely shocking and appalling that we can allow a situation where we've got a medical practice or a care home who aren't willing to properly respond to what clearly here is a deeply egregious situation where this poor individual's lost their life.
Thank you for that, Councillor Payne. Councillor Elliott has nodded his head, so I think he's taken that on board as part of the scrutiny process, and I think it needs doing as a matter of some urgency because a life has been lost here.
Can I just come in? Yeah,
Of course, more.
Can
Do you mind, Councillor Barnfather, if I
Keep
bring in
going.
Councillor
Thank you.
Elliott?
Yeah, okay. Totally concur with what's been said, and I'm more than happy to get that placed on my work programme for my Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a matter of urgency.
Thank you. Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I agree with everything that yourself and Councillor Payne have said, and obviously the fact that Councillor Elliott is here in his capacity as a substitute on this committee, but also as the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. Clearly, he's in a position to be able to take this away. I suppose the point that I would make here is that the finding of fault in this, because it's very difficult for our officers. I'm quite sure that they've had to deal with a bereaved family and great sympathy to that family. But the finding of fault here against this authority is a technical finding of fault in that we are the commissioners of a service. So statutorily, we effectively are found to be at fault, but there is no criticism of our individual officers or the way in which we carry out those commissioning services. But clearly, it's in everybody's interest to just make sure that there is proper oversight moving forward to hopefully make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, are you content to note the report? Thank you. If we can move on then to the next item, item 5, which is the annual report on the use of investigatory powers under the 2000 Act, Regulation of Investigatory Powers, Act 2000 Annual Report. And you have the report in front of you, which you are asked to note. If, unless there are any particular comments or questions, are you just happy to note that? Yep, just the one example. It's quite a draconian power, but we use it sparingly, but when necessary. Thank you. That's noted. The internal, if I move on to item 6, the internal audit charter refresh. Again, that has been set out for you, the internal audit charter. Don't know that there's anything to add to it. It's pretty straightforward, and you are asked to approve the revised charter, which I move.
Chairman, I second.
Any comments or questions? I'm happy to move to the vote. All in favour? That is unanimous, I think. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, which is item number 7, is the counter fraud progress report, which again is set out for you in the papers, and it's a noting report. If there are no comments or questions, are you just happy to note? Yep, thank you very much. The next item is the statement of accounts, or lack of them. We've got somebody from Grant Thornton here, haven't we, who's going to tell us all about it.
Thank you, Chair. So the audits are substantially complete for 22-23 for both the pension fund and the council's accounts. The pension fund was to bring our audit findings report to the next meeting, which is in February 28th. There's no material issues to report to you today, which is good. And we anticipate that our opinion will be unmodified, which is the good type. We also do the value for money audit, and again, we haven't found any significant weaknesses in the council's arrangements, so our report will be clean on that respect as well.
So I'm safe signing them off, am I?
If I may.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. The reason why the delegation is because of the public notification of a lot of outstanding statements of accounts. I didn't want to provide any undue delay in the signing off our accounts and waiting to the end of February. So that's why this report is to delegate the authority to you and I to sign them. And you've heard from Grant Thornton that there'll be no issues on the accounts. So to assure members, because I know when we did this last time, there was a concern raised in terms of whether you would feel comfortable with signing them off. So hopefully some of that assurance has been provided by Grant Thornton today that will assure councillors that these accounts will be absolutely fine in terms of signing off.
Thank you. Councillor Payne, you indicated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I don't want to be obtuse about this. I think I raised a similar issue last year. I appreciate the verbal reassurance that has been given by Grant Thornton and by our 151 officer, and I've no reason to distrust you, Nigel, having seen how effectively you've managed the council's finances. I am nervous, though, about a delegation to the chairman of the committee. Really, we as elected members ought to be seeing the statement of accounts, notwithstanding that you've said there are going to be no issues. I just really worry about the whole conversation that's taking place at the moment about local government finance. We're clearly, as a council, not in a position that some other councils are in, but we know this is being heavily looked at by the government, by the press, by taxpayers. And I'm just nervous about a delegation solely to either yourself and the chairman, or effectively to the chairman, to sign off in consultation with you without us actually having seen the accounts. Because effectively what we're relying on is a verbal reassurance. And I've no reason to disbelieve that. But should somebody down the line say, why didn't councillors ask a question around issues that arose? I'm not able to say, well, actually, I was exercising my duty and responsibility properly because I didn't see the accounts. So I'm not trying to be obtuse or awkward about this. I just know that this is absolutely the area that when councils get into difficulty, people start crawling all over and people start pointing the fingers of elected members. So I'm not trying to poke and say there are issues or create a story about this. I'm just saying that I'm nervous from a sort of responsibility of elected members' perspective, but I'm also not going to die in a ditch over this. I've made my point. Others may have a different view in the room. Nigel will probably have a contra view. I think I raised this issue last year, and I'm pleased, by the way, that we are in the position that we're in, because actually that's not true of other councils. And actually, Nigel, you and the team deserve significant credit for that. So I should also say that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You want to comment on that?
If I may, it's a fair challenge by Councillor Payne. We're pleased to note that what you've had today is that the statement of accounts, we published our statement of accounts in accordance with the statutory guidelines in July. What you'll see will be no changes to that. So there's been an opportunity for members to review those statement of accounts and raise concerns since July. Yeah. What you'll still hear when it comes to February, the audit findings report will give you again an opportunity to question and analyse and raise issues. So again, I don't want to feel that you're obligating your statutory responsibilities, because there'll still be time. You've had time to look at them, and there has been time. There'll still be additional time for challenge and understanding and questioning at the next committee.
Are you content with that?
Yeah, and I accept the point. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, and I accept the point Nigel makes about asking a question. I suppose it's just we won't have seen the full audit findings, and that's the point I'm making. But I've made my point, and we've had a response. I don't want to create a huge debate about it.
Councillor Bartlett.
I suppose the point I would wish to make is there are two separate issues here. There's the statement of accounts, which has been accessible, and there's the auditor's findings. So the actual looking at the statement of accounts and looking for discrepancies or raising questions from the accounts themselves, that's been open to us for a while. The issue is, have the auditors found anything that causes concern? And the fact that we actually have a representative from Grant Thorne here today who is saying, hey guys, I'm here to say I can find no problems. Good luck if you can. I'm the auditor and I can't find any. That to me gives me the reassurance that we need to be able to press ahead with actually delegating the responsibility for you to sign off. And of course, there's been a lot of criticism recently, as Councillor Pegg quite rightly identifies, and a lot of interest in different authorities' accounts, and a lot of that is the fact that they have been delayed, and some authorities now have got 2 or 3 years worth of outstanding accounts. So I think what we've got here from Mr. Stevenson, supported by the auditors, is basically a way forward for us to be able to make sure that our accounts are signed off, submitted, out of the way, not subject to any criticism from a third party, and I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Okay, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Abstention? 1 abstention. Thank you very much. It's carried. Item number 9 has been withdrawn, and so we move to the last item, which is the work programme, which you have set out in front of you, and you're recommended to consider whether there are any changes required to the work programme. Otherwise, it's really a case of noting the work programme unless there are. So are you happy to note the work programme? Yep, thank you very much. And at 3, maybe even 4 minutes past 11, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much for your attendance.